I just want to remind ourselves, before we speak to Iain Duncan Smith, the former leader of the Conservatives, Jack Elsom, our colleague at The Sun, he had a question on migration to Trump and to Starmer. Let's just remind ourselves what Jack asked at the press conference, and then I'll get Iain Duncan Smith's reaction.
Illegal migration is at record levels in Britain. The Prime Minister is trying to tackle that. What advice would you give to the man standing next to you on trying to stop illegal migration in Britain?
I told the Prime Minister I would stop it, and it doesn't matter if you call out the military, it doesn't matter what means you use, but it's going to destroys countries from within. And we're actually now removing a lot of the people that came into our country. It's a very hard chore. We were given a very, very bad hand. Millions of people came in from prisons and mental institutions. We have to remove them.
Jack, let me just deal with the question of returns, because this is obviously an issue we're taking incredibly seriously. We struck the returns arrangement with France, and notwithstanding the challenges to that scheme, which you've seen in the last few days, a flight went off at 6:15 this morning, successfully returning someone under that scheme. It can be done. It was done early this morning, so I can confirm that that flight went. It went successfully, and I'm pleased about that. Now we need to ramp that up at scale, which was always envisaged under the scheme, but it's very important that we have been able to prove that the proof of concept.
So on immigration, of course, we have this one-in, one-out scheme, or so-called. What's actually happened is that 5,500 people have come in since it was announced. One person has been sent back to France, one so far, and that person will be sent to India because they're an Indian national. Let's see what Sir Iain Duncan Smith, the former leader of the Conservative Party, thinks about all of this. Sir Iain, thank you for joining me this evening on the programme. What are your impressions of not just the migration aspect, but the body language, the discussions, the diplomacy of that press conference, and indeed this visit?
Well, first of all, I think it's important, overarching anything about politics, that the United States and the United Kingdom are together, both militarily and as far as possible economically. So the state visit is an important affair because it re-solidifies this, and the President himself does seem to like the UK personally. Mother was obviously Scots. So to that extent, a state visit with the most powerful man in the world and a country that is a close ally, English-speaking, has English common law. So we're very close in lots and lots of ways, as we are with other English-speaking countries around the world. So that ticks that box, which says it's right to do and it's important to stay linked to the United States and them to us. However, during the course of that, there were a couple of questions that came in. You just played one of them just now, and there the President of the United States is able to say they've had a pretty major success on the border. You know, they've deployed troops and everything else, and they've cut the numbers coming in dramatically. I don't know whether it's down to zero or not, but they have dramatically got on top of that in the last 9 or 10 months. Contrast that with the United Kingdom, where the Labour government, as it was elected, came in on the basis that they would somehow wave a magic wand, which the Conservatives hadn't managed to do, and stop the numbers coming in. First of all, it was smash the gangs. Well, that didn't very successful because there are probably more gangs than there were before operating.
They say they've disrupted 52 gangs.
Yeah, disrupted 52 gangs, and 52 more have sprung up at the same time. I mean, the fact is that it doesn't work. You can crack down on them as much as you like. The problem is the fact is that people are prepared to pay. They pay thousands to get into these boats, and so there will always be criminals ready to get that done for them. And then they decide, well, they've got to get people off the island. Well, great, that's what we were wanting to do with the Rwanda deal, which you didn't back. But look out, here comes the Convention of Human Rights and all the other bits like the Rights of the Child and the Refugee Convention, and the judges will all use that. And what happened? They used it to stop the first individual going over. You had 2 or 3 efforts at it. Finally, he says they've got 1 person off. But here's the ridiculous nature of this deal. So they're going to take 1 in for 1 out. But the trouble is the 1 in will be a legal migrant, and they will be able to bring their families in with them. So it's not 1 in, 1 out.
Yeah, very true.
It's 1 out and maybe up to 10 or 12 people in. Yeah. It's a bad deal. The only way is to do what we were proposing to do, which is you're going to have to break with the convention. You're going to have to say judges cannot reference this for migrancy, and we should send them off to a country like Rwanda for processing, which would act as a massive disincentive.
Brad in Cambridge has been in touch on WhatsApp messages and says, I just cannot believe Starmer can stand in front of this entire nation and lie through his teeth to Trump about free speech and illegal immigration. He's a sycophantic weasel. Well, Sir Iain, perhaps you wouldn't use that language, but I'm interested in your thoughts on what Starmer talked about free speech and his views on free speech. Let's just play another clip from this press conference.
I'm all for free speech. I'm also for protecting children from things that will harm them, paedophiles, those that peddle suicide, which had a terrible consequence for individual, particularly teenagers. And so that's the balance we strike. But we have had freedom of speech in this country for a very long time, and we will always protect it.
Well, clearly he's talking about the Online Safety Act, his views there. There are many who feel that free speech is under threat in this country. I'm one of them, as is J.D. Vance, the Vice President of the United States. It was interesting that I thought President Trump was actually pretty diplomatic when it came to that and a number of other issues like Israel-Palestine as well, Sir Iain.
Yeah. Well, on the freedom of speech, the fact is I think we have gone too far. And the reality is that freedom of speech also comes with the right to offend. And that is just part of it. You know, it isn't a criminal offence. It shouldn't be a criminal offence if somebody thinks you've taken offence, which is what's been going on. The police have been dragged in. They seem to be too keen to do it and go
30 people a day. 30 people are interviewed a day.
Banging on their door because somebody out there felt offended. Well, hard luck. That's life. You know, being offended. It's only when you deliberately attack somebody with a view to stirring up others deliberately to attack them. That's when it becomes a little on the edge. But even then, you've got to be very careful to trample on freedom of speech. And to some degree, I think some of the Americans are right about us. We've got to rethink our freedom of speech regulations and laws to recognize that taking offense does not make it a criminal offense. It should be considered that that is a right to offend, and that way it works. And I thought also the stuff on Israel, you're right, the president was being remarkably diplomatic in not saying, he just said we had a disagreement. They do have a disagreement because in the middle of all of this, I think European nations suddenly stepping in to do this, when we want a peace deal and we want an end to the fighting, and that what you want is Israel to stop and the prisoners to be released, the hostages to be released, and Hamas to disappear, because they have brought this all down on the Gazans, which is terrible.
Isn't it much more this recognition? Isn't it much more about the backbenches of the Labour Party? I just think we've got to be a bit cynical about this. I certainly do not think that a Palestinian state should be recognised. First of all, where is it? Is a very good question. That's probably the first question. But 147 states right around the world do recognise a Palestinian state. Will 4 more, including the UK, really make much of a difference?
Well, the question I simply ask is, you know, if we're going to do this, what are we recognising?
Yep.
So what is the entity that we recognise? Where is the government that we recognise the entity to? So it becomes a political statement, which some may say is a good idea. Others may say, well, it needs to, to have any impact, it needs to be practical. It needs to be a state that you consider. I mean, Jordan, for example, it can be argued, is the real Palestinian state. So I've heard that. So my answer to this is, why do you do this? If you're going to do it for as a public statement rather than anything else, then you should say this is our view, but it doesn't mean that we have a particular involvement with it. Or you say that we're recognising an entity.
It'll also be very interesting.
I've still yet not heard how this is being described yet. So I thought it's one thing to do that, but it's another to have an understanding and to explain to people what will happen directly that will change things as a result. It'll
be very interesting to see as well whether the conditions that Keir Starmer was talking about are actually reached. Sir Iain, I know you're someone who's very open about your faith. Your faith is something you take very seriously in a way that many other politicians don't talk about. And actually, Starmer was asked about England and whether it is a Christian country. Let's just see what he said about this.
Question to the Prime Minister, if you don't mind. Are we still a Christian country?
In terms of a Christian country, I was christened, so that is my church has been all my life, and we are, that is wired into our informal constitution. Of course, we celebrate many other faiths as well, and I'm really proud that we're able to do so as a country.
I think it was pretty uncomfortable during that question. What did you think, Sir Iain?
Well, we are predominantly a Christian country, and that doesn't mean you don't look after other people. Or, it's just a statement of fact. We are essentially, and all right, church attendance has gone down, but that still means that people stand by many of the basic tenets of what they may have been brought up to believe in within Christianity. So I think that governs us, and many of our laws are based, you know, pretty much on the Ten Commandments, and so that is all part of that process, and that involves, of course, Judaism as well. So my main point is he should have said, yes, we are predominantly a Christian country, and I myself am a believer. He might have said that. That's what he was sort of edging around. I was christened. Well, okay, what next?
Yeah, lots of people were and believe nothing and haven't been to church since.
And I think we are going to be there, you know, we're peculiarly defensive about believing as a Christian in Christianity, in God. And I just think to myself, I don't see why you should, you know, apologize or excuse for it. You know, Muslims don't, Jews don't, lots of other believers don't apologize for their belief because they have a right to believe in the way that they do. But somehow it does seem to me at times Christians are made in politics to believe that they shouldn't be saying it.
Sir Iain, thank you very much indeed. I can see on the screen in front of me that's Sir Iain Duncan Smith there, by the way, the former Conservative Party leader.